Sometimes there is justice in the world, and despite there being so many scammers out there and gurus and people who are trying to get your honest earned dollar, there is a little bit of news a-brewing. We're going to be talking about the lawsuit against Tai Lopez and his business partners today on the podcast. But before we dive in, here's one of the businesses that sponsored today's episodes. Check out this, and we'll be back soon. Do you ever feel like your payment processor is robbing you blind? For some of us, it's not blind. We look at the amount of money that's going to our payment processor month after month, and a lot of times we ask ourselves, is there a better way? I'm making good money, yet so much of it isn't actually ending up in my pocket. In the world of payment processing, in many cases, it's a cashless world, so you have to have a payment processor you can really trust. I personally am a big fan of Brad Norwood, who's the owner of PrimePaymentsUSA.com. Brad's a business owner himself. He knows all the challenges that come with running a business. More importantly, he knows the value of an individual customer. See, some of these bigger businesses, they're all about scale. They're all about bringing in as many customers as possible. But do they know your name? Do they know your business? Do they know what's important to you? In many cases, the answer is no. And in worst cases, they're just looking to get as much money from every transaction that you work hard for, which really doesn't feel too good. So you got to reach out to Brad Norwood today and understand how he's doing business and why it can save you money month after month. More importantly, you might even ask him about his zero-fee payment processing that he's offering to a select few of people. Go to PrimePaymentsUSA.com and start putting the money that you worked hard for back into your pocket. All right, so little bit of my story with good advice. I've told the story many times, and I'll be brief with it just so that I don't ramble on. But 7 years ago, I started Good Advice. I had $5,000 cash pretty much immediately that I could spend. It was in my wife's bank account. She had it all saved up. And I met a certain someone who is no longer in business or rather doesn't do the same kind of business anymore. And I would describe this person as a guru marketer. We've talked about this kind of person on the podcast before. These are the people who sell the crazy offers. They make insane promises to you. And when you finally buy it, you're like, well, wait, what am I getting here? Or like, why isn't this working? Or what's going on? And there's quite a bit of information around this and much I could say about it. You know, for instance, if I ever have an unhappy customer, typically the conversation goes, oh, well, let's talk about, where did I miss the mark? How did I not deliver on the services? How can we fix this and make you happy and make sure you get your money's worth? And if nothing else, we try to avoid that in the first place of just over delivering on our end. But in the case of these gurus, you often have people who are like, well, it's your fault. It's your fault it didn't work. It's not the guru's fault. It's your fault. The person who spent thousands of dollars, you're the reason why this didn't work, and so on and so forth. Well, if you don't know who Tai Lopez is, this is someone who has been described as an internet marketer. He's been described as an online course seller. And I'm going to get to Tai in a second, because going back to that gentleman that I mentioned, this was someone who, like I said, we have $5,000 saved, and the cost to work with this gentleman was about $5,000. I think actually it was exactly $5,000. Now, that $5,000 would eventually grow to about $15,000 spent. And do you want to know how much money I got back from that? Zero. Zilch. Nada. I did not get one customer from all of that investing. So, yeah, thinking about starting a new business, putting cash into the business, and then realizing, oh man, now all the money we've set aside, it's been wasted. So, it's a little bit of a sore spot for me. I talk a lot about scammers out there. I talk a lot about, these guru marketers who promise all of these things and just like the silliness with all of it. And today I'm not going to get super into like all those examples because, again, I've talked about it at length, but I do want to talk about Tai Lopez. Tai Lopez is often grouped in this kind of conversation. There's plenty of content people out there who have done content on Tai Lopez, who've talked about, is he a scam? Is there a scam with him? Is he making all these promises? He actually was memed to death several years ago. He is the here in my garage guy. If you're not familiar with this, Tai Lopez put out a video several years ago that of him standing in front of a Lamborghini, which this is the style of people like this. They stand in front of, rented cars and pretend like it's theirs. Now, I don't know. I'm sure this was actually Tai Lopez's car, but this is sort of like the feel and the model about it. The way I've seen this described in the private group that I was in from the marketer that I had paid for was they were talking about basically driving around, looking at mansions that were for sale, and then renting it for the day or taking pictures out in front of it without actually going inside, and basically doing whatever they could to pretend like they were more successful than they were. In fact, the story that I told was the conversation I had was someone told me, hey, you should go to the tallest building in your city, rent the condo that's at the tallest building, and film a video talking about how this is your house, this is your stuff, how you're so successful, whatever. To which I said, well, that would be, I was so naive. I said, well, that would be dishonest. And the person was like, well, that's marketing. Like, come on, dude. Like, get with the system. Come on, dude. What are you doing? Just kind of guilting me for even thinking that. And I was like, okay, well, I mean, that's lying. I'm not going to do that. Eventually parted ways with that marketer, just moved on. And so, you have Tai Lopez who has this video in front of a Lamborghini and he says, hey, I'm here in my garage with this amazing Lamborghini of mine. But you know what I love more than my Lamborghini? Books. And the camera pans over to a bookshelf in his garage with like a bunch of books on it. And he's like, stuff won't get you anywhere, but knowledge will. Like, work on yourself. And this is very much like an MO type of thing of these kinds of people that, they make it all about self-help and getting yourself out of the poor mindset and how success is so easy, money is so easy. They have the secret. They have the secret. And this is probably like one of the most consistently shared and reshared tidbits that I see from these kinds of people is that they have the secret. They know the answer. And guys, it's so simple. It's so simple. Being successful, it's so simple. Being rich is so simple. I have the secret. I can tell you. You could do it today. And it's only going to take you're going to make millions of dollars. So what's a couple grand? What's $5,000? What's 10 grand? Man, you're going to make all this money. I saw a video of Tai Lopez once years ago where he was talking about this gentleman that he was coaching, and he was talking about how they first met each other. And he said he turned to the guy and said, hey, if you wire me $20,000 today, I'm going to I think he said he was going to change his life. I can't remember, honestly, but he said, we're going to make this happen. We're going to make your business work, so on and so forth. And that's what these people do. They say, hey, yeah, just this small amount of money. We're going to, it's a drop in the bucket. It's such easy money. We're going to make all this money. And one of the most consistent things that I've talked about, and something you will hear consistently from all these other people who have run successful businesses, is that there is no overnight success story. It does take time. It's not easy. There is no easy money to be made. Now, you do get better at it. You do realize like low-hanging fruit and profitability and what things are very profitable and what's not worth your time, et cetera, and so forth. But there is no like button you press. There's no easy button that you press and then all this money is coming in. It just doesn't work that way. So Tai Lopez got memed to death about this here in my garage video. And, honestly, I kind of forgot about this guy. And then I randomly saw him on Instagram, and he was talking about his party mansion and inviting people to his party mansion, and like all these entrepreneurs would be coming out. And it was just slop in my mind. I thought it was just marketing slop and just kind of in my opinion, everything wrong with marketing today and the business world today is, money, fame, cars, etc. This wasn't Tai Lopez, but I saw a video of another business guy who was, I guess, coaching a group of people and was talking to someone about being successful and said, hey, well, what kind of car do you want to buy? And the guy who was being kind of timid was like, I don't really know if I really care about. And the business guy interrupted and was like, no. Tell me, is it a Lamborghini? Is it a Ferrari? I don't know anything about cars. So that's like the only two I can name. And the guy was like, I don't really. And he's like, come on, man, which car is it? What car are you going to buy first? And the guy was like, I guess a Lamborghini. And he was like, I knew it. I knew you were a Lamborghini guy. Like, yeah, you're going to get that Lamborghini, aren't you? And I was kind of just like, yeah, clearly this dude is not vibing with it. And I'm in the same boat. Like, I do what I do not to be incredibly rich, to not to buy expensive cars. I think those things are a waste of money. I think there's much better places you can put your dollar. But this isn't really me to be high and mighty. If people want to put their dollar there, they can. It's whatever. Ultimately, it's none of my business. But I will say, it all falls into this, just very consistent thread of, money, cars, fame, all this stuff, getting rich. It's so easy, what have you. So I see Ty doing content like this, and he's selling courses and all this kind of stuff. And it is what it is. It just is what it is. I think one of the problems in today's world is that anybody can lie, anybody can be a scammer, anybody can promise huge results. There's nothing stopping me from getting on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever and saying something like, somebody gave me $1,000 and their business transformed from 50 grand a year to $5 billion a year. Now, people would read that. They would know it's a lie. They'd be like, there's no way. And I would say that scammers today have gotten very clever. They've gotten very clever in how they talk about their success, how they talk about their results. I have very much tried to avoid being that guy. I've probably been a little too timid on sharing wins and sharing successes just because I didn't want to be that guy. I didn't want to be the person who, just made up results and success and all these things to trick people. I wanted things to be genuine. I wanted things to be honest. But this is what people do, right? So I saw Tai Lopez was putting this kind of stuff out. And just this last month, the Securities and Exchange Commission filed a lawsuit against Tai Lopez. In fact, let's pull this up real quick. Let's see here. Okay, here we go. All right, this was on September 25th. So this was about 2 weeks ago. SEC chart. This is on the SEC.gov website. SEC charges co-founders and COO of Florida holding company with misappropriating investor money and operating a Ponzi scheme. And this complaint, just skipping through it, alleges that these individuals from approximately April 2020 through November 2022, that they raised approximately $112 million from hundreds of investors through fraudulent offerings in 8 REV portfolio companies, including Pier 1 Imports Online, Dress Bar Online, Radio Shack Online. The complaint alleges that the defendants sold securities in the form of unsecured notes, promising up to 25% annualized returns as well as equity with a monthly preferential dividend as high as 2.083%. The purported purpose of the offerings was to raise capital to acquire the predecessor of and raise additional operating capital for each particular REV retailer brand. However, according to the complaint, Lopez and Mayer, this is Alexander Mayer, made material misstatements in connection with those offerings about the success and profitability of these business models and these retailer brands, as well as the safety of investors' investments. And the complaint alleges that the defendants transferred at least $5.9 million in investor proceeds directly between portfolio companies, contrary to the written and oral representations made to the investors about the use of those proceeds, and that at least $5.9 million of the returns distributed to the investors were, in reality, Ponzi-like payments funded by other investments, and that the defendants misappropriated approximately $16.1 million in investor funds for Lopez's and Mayer's personal use. I'm going to go out on a limb, and when the SEC itself charges you with an 8-figure charge, a Ponzi scheme, this is probably not good. It's probably not good. So I want to talk about a couple of things real quick, a couple of the themes that you're going to see consistent between scams like this. And again, this is just allegedly to Tai Lopez. I'm not gonna say I've never worked with the guy. I don't know the guy, but I will say it's very similar to some of the trends we see elsewhere. And I'll point out these trends that are very easy to see in this charge. The first one is that these people are very good at minimizing risk. They talk about how it's so safe, it's so easy. The only outcome is for you to make money. And what they do is the reason they buy a Lamborghini, the reason they have like the party mansion, the reason they have all these things is to convince you that they know what they're talking about. You look at someone who has all the nice things and you think, okay, well, clearly it's working for them. Thus, it must work for me. But these people are actually using you to fund their own investments, and you are effectively a sucker for them. So, looking at this particular charge, according to the complaint, Lopez and Mayer made misstatements about the success and profitability of these retailers' business model. This is something that every marketing scamming guru does. They say, oh, you're going to get, like I said, you spend $1,000 here, you're going to make $1 million. And instead of like proving that statement, instead of saying, here are some other customers, like for me, whenever I'm talking to a new customer and we're having conversations about working together, especially on the consulting side of things, which is several $1,000s, I want that person to feel very comfortable with the investment. And so I do a number of things. I say, hey, here's a list of my previous customers. Hey, here's their contact informations. Hey, you can look up their businesses. They are real businesses. Hey, give them a phone call. Hey, talk to them. Hey, reach out to them. Ask them whatever you want. And these aren't, by the way, these aren't people like I've paid or anything. Like I literally just give the customer list and I say, hey, some of them I think we accomplished some great things and some of them, probably not so much. But feel free to call whoever, ask them whatever you want, and they're going to give you an honest take. And I'll be honest, I have shared that with people and then never heard back from the person again. I've also shared that list with people and had a phone call back in half an hour of let's do this. I try to just be as transparent and honest as possible so that people can make the wisest decision for their business. And sometimes a wise decision for their business is not always working with me. Other times it's the exact answer. So I try not to be, these scammers try to make all these promises and lies about all these huge successes and how it's so safe. And, it's kind of wild that they get away with it. But they get away with it because there's usually no accountability, except in this circumstance. The other thing that's really interesting about this is, let's see if I can find the particular line here. It's not like particularly mentioned here, but these people know enough about a situation to really convince people that like you're behind the 8 ball if you don't do it. And so it's like, oh, I have all these other investors. Oh, I have all these other people who are doing it. We only have a few slots left. There's like an implication of exclusivity. There's like an implication of like lost opportunity. They will say things like, there's never going to be a time like this again. There's never going to be a moment like this again. Hey, this is really, or obnoxiously, they have some random data point from 40 years ago about some randomly associated thing that's really not even that relevant to say, hey, the last time that this happened was the California gold rush. And I want to tell you about one family in particular, the, Autolofs. I don't know. This is a horrible example. Making this up. But do you know John Autoloff? You don't? Oh, well, John Autoloff, a lot of people made a lot of money in the gold rush, but John Autoloff built his empire. He became the LA's first billion. And it's always like niche enough facts that you can't Google it. They're not going to say Bill Gates, right? Which wouldn't make sense in this example, but they're not going to name drop a famous person. They're going to say, you don't know John Autoloff? Really? This is California. This is LA's first billionaire. Yeah, it's kind of a random fact. It's kind of like sideways and like history's info. So it's not always talked about. But again, I have the secret. I have the knowledge. I know what's going on. And the reason that he made so much money was he did X, Y, and Z. And by the way, we're talking about doing that exact same thing today with Pure One and Radio Shack and It's always like these name brand things that people can associate with that's like, oh, wow, well, that can't be a scam. I mean, I know Radio Shack, right? Despite the fact that this place is going out of business. And then just like the cleverness, like these people never really show how the sauce gets made. In this particular case, they were using funds from the investors were paying in funds, and then they were using, if I'm understanding this correctly, using funds from those investors to pay out other investors, presumably so that those people would continue investing back into it. And the whole thing's a big scam. And as they pointed out here, they called it a Ponzi-like scheme. Probably the last big name to go to jail for this was Bernie Madoff. Back in, when did Bernie Madoff? Let's see. Bernie Madoff. This was back in, this was $65 billion. So 112 million is kind of a drop in the bucket. But this was back in, what year is this? 2021? Is that right? Let's see. I think this is 2021. That feels like that's too recent, though. Bernie Madoff. Let's see. No, 2009. Okay, yeah. This is just an article of 2021. Okay, yeah. 2009, he was arrested and pleaded guilty and went to jail for a very long time. So 16 years ago. I haven't heard of anyone since who's gone to jail for something like this. Certainly, Tai Lopez is, the accusation here is a sliver of the amount that Bernie Madoff went to jail for. But yeah, again, I'm skirting around this conversation a little bit, but whether Tai Lopez is guilty or not, I think anytime that scammers are brought to justice, it is a good thing. And the lesson learned for you, the aspiring business owner, is remember, if it is too good to be true, it is. It is. That's all there is to it. If someone comes to you and says, and here's a couple other languages that people use, by the way, that's particularly offensive, is, they name off the tried and true things that work, and then they say, that's the old way. Let's talk about the new way. And the new way is like they're trailblazing, they're ambitious. They know the secret. They know the secret of how to do this. And so they say, email marketing, PPC, digital ad campaign, that's the old way of getting customers. Hey, I'm going to tell you about the new way that no one's talking about yet. Something that took me from $100,000 in revenue to $10 million per month. A way that no one's been talking about that is incredible. And more importantly, we're going to talk about it over this next 30 minutes. And do you see, this is something that you could take that speech and put it across so many marketers today who are telling some version of that, some story of that. I mean, it's just insanity to me. It's insanity to me. And if you hear people talk that way, run the other direction. Seriously, it's the old Bible verse, a fool and his money are soon parted. You are a fool if you are falling for this kind of stuff. And here's what I'll say, though, to your credit, lack of money makes people desperate. And when you're running a business, when you're trying to make ends meet, you started this business thinking it would be easy and it wasn't easy. A lack of cash, a lack of funds makes people crazy, and it makes you indulge in these things, and it makes you think, well, maybe it would work. Maybe it would work for me. And what I can tell you, I talked about the $15K that I spent. Collectively, all the money I've spent on, maybe that will work. Maybe it could work for me. None of it did. Let me just say it very clearly. None of it did. Okay. I've spent much more than 15 grand on across these different things, and it doesn't work. The tried and true business practices is what's work. And that is very simply know what you sell, know who you sell it to, and spend everything you can to make sure that what you're selling is better than the other people out there who are selling the same thing. That you're beating them on price, you're beating them on service, you're beating them on quality, and ideally a number of those things together, not just, no one does it like we do, and it's the same for in everyone else's mind. Like, legitimately spend your effort, time, and energy in making sure that you are delivering on your promise better than competitors are, and you will see your business grow. Hey, thanks for listening to today's podcast episode, and thanks for letting me rant a little bit about Tai Lopez. Don't get scammed, fam. Don't get scammed. Make good decisions, okay? As always, we'll be back later in the week for more good advice. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you're a first-time listener, what are you waiting on? Click the subscribe or follow button so you can keep getting good advice wherever you are. And all that to say, we do have a Patreon, patreon.com/goodadvice, where you can support the podcast. I appreciate you listening today. That's today's good advice. We'll see you later.